Hi, I'm Steve Hines, and welcome to part two of how to lose weight, keep it off, and feel great. So, how do you know if you're at risk of being overweight and some of these associated health conditions? Well, there are several ways to ascertain your weight and your body composition. The body composition would be defined as your fat mass compared to your lean mass. And there are different ways to ascertain whether you're at risk of being overweight and at risk of some of these associated health conditions that I discussed in part one. Now, these same measurements that you use to ascertain where you're starting from can also be employed to monitor your weight loss progress throughout any kind of weight loss program. Now, standing on the scales is usually the first port of call for most people to monitor their weight. Now, although measuring your weight is good practice, you need to remember the scales only tell you your gravitational attraction to the earth in stones, pounds, or kilos, or whatever you use. They don't tell you anything about your body composition or your regional fat distribution. Now, to get a true body weight and to chart your weight loss, only weigh yourself once a week, on the same day, at the same time, on the same pair of scales after emptying your bowels and bladder and whilst naked. So deviating from this advice could give you false and highly variable readings. So for example, weigh yourself first thing in the morning on Monday morning on your bathroom scales, and only do it at that same time, same day, on the same pair of scales once a week. Now, body mass index, or BMI, is another measurement tool used to determine whether you are under, over, or of normal weight. Now, BMI is a calculation of your body weight in kilos divided by your height in meters squared. Now, it's used a lot in medical research to classify your weight and your health. But I would suggest it's a pretty obsolete term nowadays. It's not without criticism. For example, a male with a lot of muscle mass may actually be of normal weight and extremely lean, 8 or 10% body fat, but they'd be classified as being overweight purely because they're extremely muscly. Whereas someone who has very little muscle mass but some additional fat, so what I classically term as a skinny fat, may show up in the normal band. So BMI doesn't tell you anything about other important markers for health and disease, such as your waist and hip circumference. It doesn't tell you anything about your body fat percentage, and it doesn't tell you anything about your regional body fat stores. So I would only use BMI very loosely to chart your weight loss progress. What are much better to ascertain are the following things: your waist circumference and your waist to hip ratios. Now, these are two good measures employed by health professionals as a simple and effective tool to identify obesity and disease risk. So research has demonstrated that men with a normal body mass index that have a 40-inch waist are twice as likely to die than men with a 34-inch waist, and that women with a normal body mass index that have a 35-inch waist are about 80% more likely to die than women with a 29-inch waist. So BMI is pretty useless when we look at it in conjunction with waist circumference. Now, waist circumference can be measured with a standard tape measure, and it should be measured around what should be the narrowest point between your waist and your rib cage. Sorry, between your hips and your rib cage. Now, clearly a lower score is better. Numerous other studies have demonstrated the metabolic complications and disease risk of having a high waist to hip ratio, i.e. a greater measurement in inches or centimeters around what should be the narrowest point of your waist compared to the widest point of your hips. Now, the true healthy waist to hip ratio may vary a little bit depending on what studies you read, but it could be classified as less than 0.8, 0.85 in women, and around 1 to 1 or less than 1 to 1 in men. So, i.e., women should have a much narrower waist than their hips, so that sort of hourglass figure, and men should have a very, very slightly narrower waist compared to their hips. Now, again, this can easily be measured with a tape measure at home, or if you're seeing a nutritionist or a personal trainer, again, they can do that quite easily. Now, knowing your body fat percentage is also important to assess your disease risk and to chart your weight loss progress. Now, clearly, the more overweight or obese you are, the more body fat you'll have. But thin people can also have excess body fat. Now, there are many different ways to measure your body fat, but suffice to say that using skin fold calipers is my preferred way to measure your skin fold thickness, your body fat, and it can be used to chart your regional fat distribution. So sites such as the back of the arm, the shoulder blade, the hip, the tummy, various sites on the legs being commonly used in research studies. But taking these sites regularly also can tell you where you're losing your body fat from and what's happening in your body. Now, normal levels of body fat differ depending on which sources you read. The World Health Organization and the National Institute of Health recommendations are the following. So for women between 20 and 40 should have 21 to 33% body fat. Between 41 and 60, 23 to 35% body fat. And between 61 and 79, 24 to 36% body fat. And men between 20 and 40 should be 8 to 19% body fat. From 41 to 60, 11 to 22% body fat. And from 61 to 79, 13 to 25% body fat. Now, I'd suggest from my own data that I've collected over the last 4 years or so in athletes and general population that these ranges are just way too high. There's absolutely no way that 33-35% body fat for a woman, regardless of what their age is healthy. I mean, that's absolutely absurd. And the same with men. I measure men at 22-25%, and these people are grossly obese. So these recommendations are absurd. I would recommend, from my data, that lean men are between 4 and 8% body fat, and that's extremely lean. And to visualize this would be the kind of man you'd see on the front of a Men's Health magazine or Men's Fitness, where you can clearly see all of their muscular definition, the pecs, all 6 to 8 of their abs clearly on show. And the same is for women. Women clearly don't need to be as lean as men, and the healthy range for women would be anywhere from around 14 to around 18% body fat. Now, if a woman is 14 to 18% body fat, they'll be quite lean, and again, you'll see good abdominal definition. You won't necessarily see all of their rectus abdominis muscles, but you'll clearly see the linea alba, the line down the front, and they won't have these kind of bulging muffin tops and other sort of fat areas on their body. But it's important to remember that women shouldn't get too low in body fat, because this will affect menstruation and bone health. So join me in part 3, where I'm going to talk about some different weight loss diets.